Hi YouTube, this is interesting, Andrew. It's a Saturday morning. I didn't have time last night to post my reading on Summa Theologica, so I'm doing it now. I've got my nicotine, my coffee, and I'm ready to go. Real quickly, I was wondering if you guys would be okay with me actively reading Summa Theologica and giving you my thoughts as I go along. Just when I have more free time on the weekends, for instance, I could read an hour or two and we could knock out some more material pretty fast that way. Let me know what you think in the comments below. So today we will be starting on question 9, article 1, page 90. And the question is whether God is altogether immutable. And for you guys to understand what they mean by immutability, that means cannot change. So like think mutation, not muting a television and turning off the sound. That's not what immutability is. So objection. It seems God is not altogether immutable. As Augustine says, the Creator Spirit moves himself neither by time nor by place. Therefore, God is in some way mutable. Further, it is said of wisdom, the book of wisdom, it is more mobile than all things active. Wisdom 7:24. But God is wisdom itself. Therefore, God is movable. James 4:8, they pull from, draw nigh to God and he will draw nigh to you. Therefore, God is mutable because he's changing his location. And so Aquinas answers, on the contrary, I am the Lord and I change not, in the book of Malachi, chapter 3, verse 6. God is immutable because he is the first principle and first being. Sometimes in these answers, I'm going to actually add a little bit for clarification. So I think I added that he was the first principle. As I said in earlier questions, God is all actuality, not potentiality. He affects change in everything. He applies the force, not the other way around. Again, as we had talked before, with God being the primary agent that enacted all action upon the universe, and it's all playing out, it's not a change in his behavior or anything like that, his essence. Also, the being that he is all actuality and not potentiality, he has no potential to change because he's already enacted 100% onto the universe. There is no potentiality within him still. Everything's being played out. So, all the other problems extend from figures of speech. God drawing near is technically impossible because he is already everywhere. Yeah, I mean, sometimes these questions are just people misunderstanding figures of speech, I guess, and taking it a little too literally. Then I go to question 9, article 2, page 92. So I'm going to move my place marker. Whether there is a good definition for eternity. Oh, sorry. No. Whether to be immutable belongs to God alone. Sorry, I jumped to another question and article. The philosopher says, and a lot of times when they're referring to the philosopher, it's going to be Aristotle, because even all the writings of Socrates are actually written by Aristotle, remembering what Socrates taught him. So kind of the philosopher as a title is assigned to Aristotle because he is the foremost philosopher of the ancients. The philosopher says, matter is in everything that is moved. Being that angels and souls lack matter, they must also be immutable. And then Aquinas answers, on the contrary, Augustine says, God alone. So St. Augustine, he wrote City of God and also Confessions. In the Harvard Classics, I read Confessions, which is kind of like his biography, and then I think some of City of God. God alone is immutable. In all things he is made, being made from nothing, and flowed from the first principle, they are mutable. I added some words to that clarification. So, yeah, because he was a first principle, he has moved everything else. And souls, angels, they are mutable because he created them. And so they actually have mutable qualities to them. Okay, so now we're going to go to question 10, article 1 on page 95. Okay, so whether there is a good definition for eternity. Eternity, when I was a youth pastor and I would teach people, and also when I was teaching like college age people, is difficult to grasp because all that we know is time. We only know before and after, action and consequence. So to grasp something that falls outside of that is pretty difficult. So, whether there is a good definition for eternity. The objection. Eternity signifies a certain kind of duration, but duration regards existence over life. Therefore, the word life ought not to come into the definition of eternity, but rather the word existence. His answer, I'm actually going to read directly from it because it was so dense and I couldn't really add much to it. I do afterward have some stuff for my own words, but I have to pull from here because it was so good. So I'm just going to read it verbatim. I answer that as we attain the knowledge of simple things by the compound things, so we must reach to the knowledge of eternity by the means of time, which is nothing but the numbering of movement by before and after. For since succession occurs in every movement, and one part comes from another, the fact that we reckon before and after in movement makes us apprehend time. I thought that was really good. Everything we know is based on causation, which is nothing else but the measure of before and after in movement. Now, in a thing bereft of movement, which would be eternity, which is always the same, there is no before or after. As therefore, the idea of time consists in the numbering of before and after in movement. So likewise, in the apprehension of uniformity of what is outside of movement consists in the idea of eternity. Further, those things are said to be measured by time, which have a beginning and an end in time. Because in everything which is moved, there is beginning and there is end. But as whatever is wholly immutable can have no succession, so it has no beginning and no end. Thus, eternity, and I put this in like double brackets because I thought it was so good. Thus, eternity is known from two sources. First, because what is eternal is interminable, that is, has no beginning nor no end. That is, no term either way, actually term, like a term of time. Secondly, because eternity has no succession, being simultaneously whole. Kind of a complex idea to grasp for us mere mortals. So in my words, I said eternity exists outside the line segment of time. Points of geometry, a line segment has the starting point and the end point, and there is, no matter how long it is, it could be bracketed up infinitesimally into smaller and smaller segments. You cannot do that with eternity because it literally, its definition itself does not allow for that. So for us, we exist in the dimension of time. As if you ever watch some sci-fi, they consider time a actual dimension. Therefore, for us to think of something outside of that is going to be very hard for us to comprehend. So, eternity exists outside the line segment of time. It has no markers or limits, and it is immutable, not changing. So, that's the best way to comprehend eternity. And I thought it was really good. Now, for the rest of question 10, it gets into the subject of I've eternity. And I put all of my words from the text. I have never even heard of I've eternity, but I have brushed up upon the idea. I just never had a word for it. So, let's just go into it and I will tell you what I think. I've eternity is a subject concerning objects joining eternity. This concerns angels and mankind. Angels did not always exist. They had a beginning. But joined to eternity where God exists, this could be shown in math as a ray, a line with a beginning but no end. So basically, you could put a blip and say that was the day that God created angels. There was a time before that in eternity where there were no angels. And everything after there will be the eternity that angels experience. You could say that again with ourselves. And when we reach heaven, we will have a moment where we join eternity and it will go on. That would be I've eternity. So mankind will join eternity at the resurrection. Because of this, whether our choice is God or hell, our existence will also join the eternal. This is I've eternity. My words. I've eternity can also be described as an age. So the age before angels would be eternity. And then the time after God created angels would be a new age. And then the next age would be when we join the eternal. Would be one way to say it. Sometimes people just call those days. In the day of, for instance. Okay? That was a really hard one for me. And it took a lot longer than it took for me to read it just now than it did for me to grasp it and put it into language that I thought would be able for us to comprehend. So question 11, Article 3 is where I pick up next. That is on page 111. Let me see here. So, on the oneness of God, whether God is one. So, the objections, it seems God is not one, for it is written, for there are many gods and many lords. 1 Corinthians 8:5. Chapter 8, verse 5. Further, God cannot be one, since quantity cannot be predicated of God. Likewise, neither can one, which is convertible with being, be predicated of God, because it imports privation, and every privation is an imperfection, which cannot apply to God. Okay? On the contrary, Aquinas answers, it is written, sorry. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. Deuteronomy 6:4. It can be shown in three sources, that God is one. First, his simplicity. For it is manifest that the reason why any singular thing, this particular thing, is because it cannot be communicated to many. For God himself is his own nature. As shown in question 3, Article 3, we already discussed this. Therefore, in the same way God is God, and he is this God, it is impossible, therefore, that many gods should exist. I think, I don't write it down, but I was explaining this to one of my friends when we were working yesterday, that if there were many gods, the ability to reflect backwards, as Aristotle and other Greek philosophers did, that there'd be one consistent God would not be, you wouldn't be able to deduce that, because there would be chaos at some extent within the universe, no matter how allied they may be. There would be some disconnect, and there would be some incongruities within the nature of the universe, mathematics or something. Okay? Secondly, this is proved by the infinity of his perfection. For it is shown in question 4, Article 2, that God comprehends in himself the whole perfection of being. If then many gods exist, this would not be the case. Thirdly, This is shown in the ordered unity of the world. Since God is the first principle and has ordered all species to unity, it points to the oneness. Therefore, for there to be many gods, this would not be the case. Okay, so I do go over it. Okay. Again, if there was a multiplicity of Lord gods, you would not be able to deduce back to the order and the unity of the creation. Okay? And then question 11, article 4 on page 113 is the next point that I jump to. Whether God is supremely one. Objection. What is essentially good is supremely good. Therefore, what is essentially one is supremely one. But every being is essentially one. Therefore, every being is supremely one. So, God is not one more than any other being. On the contrary, Aquinas says, Bernard says, among all things called one, the unity of the divine Trinity holds the first place. As an aside, when I was talking with my coworker, I'm out in Utah, so he's LDS, or he was raised LDS, and they do not recognize the Trinity. They recognize it as three gods, which is actually a heresy that was addressed back in like the 4th century, if I'm not mistaken, in the Council of Nicaea, if I'm not incorrect. And so we get into that, and it was a fun conversation. Since one is an undivided being, if anything is supremely one, it must be supremely being and supremely undivided. Now, both of these belong to God, for he is supremely being in the first principle. Again, if it was actually divisible for the nature of his being and everything else, he couldn't be the first principle. There would have to be something before that then. And supremely undivided. For he is supremely being, inasmuch as his being is not determined by any nature to which it is adjoined, since he is being itself subsistent, and that's another key point. Like he derives all being of his essence from his being, his oneness. He is he would be self-sufficient in that category. He is not of matter, he created matter. And absolutely undetermined. But he is supremely undivided inasmuch as he is divided neither actually nor potentially by any mode of division. I started to write in my own words and I realized he had just said it, so I just have to explain a little better. If you remember, and I think question 2 or question 3, they talk about the actuality and then the potentiality. The actuality is God actualizing everything into existence. There is no potentiality left in God, or never was, I should say. He never changes. He's immutable. And then all potentiality is things playing out in the universe through time, and that is not found within him. And then, since he is altogether simple, as shown in question 3, article 7, hence it is manifest that God is one in the supreme degree, was the final answer. So that would be all the way up until the next series of questions. I just jumped to question 12, and I have not started that yet. I'm thinking after this video, I'm going to actually just start reading it, and then we can just go through it together, and I can tell you my thoughts as I'm going through it. Okay? So this has been interesting, Andrew. Thank you very much, and hopefully you'll join me on the next video. Thank you.